We just couldn't stay away. We had to start an early week of Respect the Process. I am Kelly Hunter alongside the voice of Crimson Tide Athletics, Chris Stewart. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. Another good weekend. Not perfect. I know some stuff we'll talk about there, but you got another win. You got two big games, but two very winnable games coming up. So you see what happens there, and excited about the fact that I don't have to going on the road, but don't have to spend the night on the roads. No. Going to Starkville and then back home for a matchup with Georgia. So it's a dog week.
It's a big dog week.
It is a big dog week.
Did LSU bus up there? Because when we were leaving, we saw them on the LSU buses, and I was like, well, that would piss me off if I had to ride from Baton Rouge to Tuscaloosa.
Here's the thing, probably not. They probably sent their own bus ahead because Alabama does that.
Okay, I thought they did.
We charter, but there's a bus company that Alabama's contracted with, and part of the deal is normally that even if the team is flying, you're having to lease buses anyway, so they simply send our bus drivers in their buses ahead.
Is it your big teamed up bus that says Alabama?
It doesn't have
Well, this was the big LSU bus that had the purple and gold.
Yeah, they buy that, and they do that themselves. And, some schools do that. Not many. Okay. Not many, but a few do.
Because that's a long, if you've never had to do the Tuscaloosa to Baton Rouge, it's not the worst, but it's not the prettiest.
True, but also, let me tell you, I don't know what the flight situation was out of Baton Rouge with the snow and everything. It's not likely that was an issue getting out, but it's possibly.
Well, I didn't know because, thank goodness they don't get grades because it wasn't a beauty contest, but they got a W out of this one. And the first half was a frustrating half of basketball to watch because as a spectator, you felt that there was a lack of hustle or there was not a sense of importance, particularly in rebounding. Yeah. Because you're looking at this and you're watching this LSU team that doesn't look very good. You feel like Alabama's playing down to their level. Right. And they're getting out-rebounded.
I think that was part of it. I do know that, those really close to LSU say that was their best effort all year. Yeah. They played their best. They were into it, energy. I think when you're playing against a highly ranked team and you're the underdog, there is a little something extra there. And we say this with every SEC team, and it's true. Everybody's talented enough to win. Now, clearly, South Carolina hasn't. Arkansas has only one. I think Oklahoma has won, maybe 2 wins now.
Georgia has 2.
But Georgia almost beat Auburn. South Carolina had Auburn beat. I think South Carolina, of their 7 losses, 5 are by 5 points or less.
And they went to overtime against State this past weekend.
Yeah, 2 possession games that they've lost. And you don't, at the end of the day, you look and you go, that's a lot. Go back and watch and see how many loose ball rebounds, loose ball situations you fail to get, boards that you don't get, shots that go halfway down and pop out, and you do the math on everything and that happens, and you go, if 2 of those go our way, we probably win that game. I know there's all sorts of stuff you can go back and forth, but my point is that's how fine the line is in winning and losing, and for a team like South Carolina that could easily be 500 or better, and instead, because this league is what it is, they're sitting there, yes, winless, but very close to getting some big games against some of the best that the league has to offer.
Okay. So we're getting back to Alabama and LSU.
Let's go.
Okay. Because you're sitting there at halftime and you're like, I don't know what Nate is going to do at this point. Because to start the game, Chris Youngblood was one of the 5 starters. Right. Really, any 5 guys could start off of this Alabama team. Right. He could craft a combination of any of these 5 guys.
And make a valid argument based on resume that no fan is going to argue.
Exactly. So, usually you're going to have Mark Sears in there. You're going to have a Grant Nelson, but he had Chris Youngblood starting, and LeBaron Filan was the one who he was kind of off the bench, but
he was, and a little bit of that, the majority of it, I think, is that he was banged up a little bit. I've forgotten what it was. What do we joke about those lower upper middle leg injuries? When they get real vague with stuff, that's fine. Yeah. That's just kind of where we are with things now. But
he's also a young guy playing a full conference schedule this year, so yeah.
No question about that. But also the fact that he wasn't full speed or able to go full speed, I think on maybe Friday before the game on Saturday, you put Chris Youngblood in there knowing that Philon's going to play, but you just start the veteran guy.
And Youngblood had a great first half.
He was terrific.
So
and he's been terrific, and he will remain terrific. He is a fantastic player.
So we go to halftime and we come out. Now, to overshadow the game, and also let me set the scene. So I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the game Saturday night. My husband and I took our 4 kids. First time in Coleman Coliseum, but of course, being us, we had 3 seats here and 3 seats over there.
Gotcha.
So at halftime, Coach Oates sends 5 out, and you're kind of sitting there, and the guy next to me for the first half, I realize I'm thinking this through, and he's like, I need Nelson to get 3. I need Cliff to get 2 more. And I'm like, oh, he's got prop bets going on this. Well, Mark Sears does not come out, and he's not starting the second half of the game.
This guy was in meltdown mode.
And he's not playing the second half of the game. This guy's losing it. So me, using privilege that I probably should not, I text you while you're on the air doing your job.
Did I answer?
Yes, because I said, is Mark Sears okay? And I think I said, I can't remember if I said, because the guy next to me is losing it.
Yeah.
And you wrote back, no injury that I know of, probably out because he had a crap first half, which he did. He went 0 for 5
What did I
in the
say?
first half.
What did I
say? And the guy next to me
Sears
was
hurt? I don't think so. I said 0 for 5 at the half.
Yes.
And I said, knowing him, he probably said, stay with the hot hands, talking about guys that were making shots
because
and successful. He's done that before.
He has done that before, and if you want to call it selfless, if you want to call it awareness, call it what you want. Well, the guy next to me then is losing it because now Mark Sears, it does not look like, is playing the entire second half of the basketball game.
And that would be tough if you do the type things where you're factoring in financial success based on whether or not a kid plays, and you've got him doing a bunch, and he doesn't play at all, except as we're seeing, in the video where he's sitting there on the bench.
Okay, so what's interesting is, earlier on the next round, Ron Slay was talking and said, and he was talking actually about Ja'Kai Howard down at Auburn, how he did not, I guess he came out for the second half and then was told to go back to the locker room during the second half because he and Coach Pearl were at odds. Gotcha. And Ron made a great point by saying, coaches don't have time to be the guidance counselor.
It's true.
We're in the middle of a damn game here, okay? Mm-hmm. I've got to focus on the second half. I've got to keep my energy up. I've got to focus on our plan.
Right.
We'll deal with this after the game or at another time when probably we all have cooler heads prevailing. That's what assistant coaches are for, as we saw Mark Sears sitting on the bench, talking to
Preston Murphy,
a variety of assistant coaches.
Yep. That is it. And look, when the half starts, I'm running through the players on the floor. And I realize I haven't said Mark Sears' name. And I go, and Mark Sears is on the bench. Okay. And I didn't see Clark Holter working on him, which was a relief. Then
He's in uniform.
It's natural. This is as deep and talented a roster as any in the country. It is probably the deepest, most talented that the University of Alabama has ever had. And I know we're saying this one season after they just went to a Final Four, 2 years removed from a number 1 ranking and number 1 national seed with multiple NBA players on the roster. But I stand by the statement that this is probably the most talented roster. However, Mark Sears is clearly the guy.
He is.
And so when he's not there, there's a lot of buzz. I wasn't overly concerned as it continued on. You realize, okay, he's not coming back in all likelihood. And he's not going to play. And you start to get the feel based on things you're seeing or being told body language-wise that he's not. That's disappointing. That is concerning. There's no question. Here's what I'll tell you. As you and I record this around 10 minutes till 2 on a Monday afternoon, I'm going to guess, and I've had no conversation with anybody in the basketball office, the staff, None of that. I have a very strong feeling, though, based on who Mark is and who Nate Oates is, and knowing how they share common goals and how rare this is to have any issue at all with Mark Sears. There was a 3-minute post-game oratory that Nate Oates gave after the Vanderbilt game. No, I'm sorry. Maybe it was Vandy. It was a game last week, whether it was the win Saturday or last week. But there was a full 3 minutes.
Yep.
Because I went back and listened to it where he is praising Mark after he'd hit 2,500 career points, making him one of, I think, only 82 in the history of the game that have ever done that at that level or in the last several decades. Talking about him and who he is as a player, a leader, a person. You don't do that if you don't genuinely feel that way. And I know enough. I've been with Mark many times, traveled with Mark for speaking engagements, know his family, great people. In the heat of the moment, we do things out of character. Unfortunately, I've been guilty of it. We all have, if we're being honest, at some level. So if things got a little heated, I wouldn't be at all surprised. But at the same time, I'll be shocked if when Alabama rolls out and plays on Wednesday, that water is not very much under the bridge by that point.
Because post-game, we heard Coach Oates talk about the standout players of the game, who I gave the hard hat to. Now, he didn't play Cliff in the second half, but Cliff ended up getting...
We didn't start him.
Start the second half.
He played him a lot.
Thank you. But he did not mention Mark. Now, granted, is Coach Oates still in the moment where he has just watched his team struggle to play against this LSU to finally, because LSU, even down to the final 3 minutes, kept creeping back to within...
It was a ball game.
8. They won by 7.
Right.
So is Nate still kind of in the heat of the moment of this game? I think so. This thing takes on a life of its own then when you have Mark Sears' mom go on social media and
look,
I'm a mom.
Lamika's great.
I'm a mom.
I'm not going to get into stuff there. I know Lamika's a great lady, great person, animated, of course. That's part of the appeal. We all do that. We all, I'm not going to get in that other than I'll say everybody involved I consider to be very good acquaintances, if not friends. So, and I have no problem saying that I don't think there's going to be, by the time this team goes to play in Starkville on Wednesday, this will all be in the past. It's going to happen when you're as high profile a player. If this team was 500 and Mark was the sixth man, there's zero conversation about this.
Or what if this team was playing Kentucky? Do you think that it would have been a different? What was it? The luxury of playing LSU? Or
that's not who I think. I don't think that's who Nate is.
Because that's what obviously.
I think Nate is Nate. There's some that don't like that. There's some that don't like that. Look, but we've all seen it. I'll never forget. There was a high school game I played in where it's easier.
Worst thing a coach has ever said or done.
Worst thing?
While you were a player. I tell my kids this all the time. My high school varsity basketball coach got so mad at me, he threw his shoe at me during the game. Like, I'm on the court, and he throws his shoe at me. This is also back in the day, kids, when your parents did not come down to the coach and demand an apology. Your parents just sat there and she probably deserved it.
Your coach threw a shoe at you.
He took his shoe off, and he threw it at me on the court.
Kelly, I will say there are two things at play right here. Number one, I don't think there is any justification for hurling an object, if you're an adult especially, at a child. In that situation,
I was 17 at the time.
I will say there was no justification for that. However, I will steal the line from Chris Rock in his famous stand-up routine. Mm-hmm. I ain't saying it's right, but I understand.
I understand. I know.
I know you. So I love you,
I don't
but I
remember,
know you. I ain't saying it's right, but I understand.
I don't remember the exact context of it, but clearly we were down on our end of the court. So I'm guessing we were back on defense and I had done something that I was not supposed to, probably several times. And that eventually he just didn't call a timeout, just threw a shoot. That's back in the 90s. That's what...
Nate Oates is going to coach you the way he thinks he should coach you, regardless of who you are. He's going to be fair. You got to remember now, Mark is the player of the year, the preseason player of the year in the SEC, first team all-conference, preseason all-American, all of those things. But he's on a roster where your newcomers, McDonald's All-Americans, your new guys in the program, best players on their teams, wherever the transfers, Mohamed Diabate is the only guy you look at and go, well, that's a role guy. Well, that role guy went for 20 and 20 prior to the game the other night, 2 consecutive games. And everybody can play. Mm-hmm. So here's my point. You're going to have a bigger problem if you don't manage things right with your star than you will if you show too much leniency.
No,
I'm not saying you make an example out of somebody unfairly, but if that's how you would treat Darion Reed, then that better be how you treat Mark Sears.
Because when you look at this is as of this past Saturday, after Saturday's game, Sears averages 18.1 points a game. The next closest is Grant Nelson with 12.6. That's a big drop-off when you talk about averages per game. That's 6 points per game. That's the next closest.
True.
He averages 32 minutes a game.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the next closest is Grant with 27. It's like he's a guy you got to have out there. Reggie Jackson, the straw that stirs the drink, especially when you look at what they've got coming up over the next few weeks. They've got, right now, you've got the
back half is tougher schedule than the front.
Flexibility.
You're right.
Because, we've got State on Wednesday, Georgia on Saturday. Then you go at Arkansas, at Texas, which isn't great that you've got 2 at-ats.
Look,
but then
this is going to be a deal where I bet you after, here in a month, we're going to be, thank goodness he didn't play half the game. We were able to rest him up.
Because you've got Auburn, Missouri, Missouri's always kind of a surprise. Like, I'm not going to say always a surprise, but they always have the potential.
Sure. They're sitting there. Did they lose the other night? Did they lose Saturday? They were up. I think I should have it in front of me. I don't. But they're 2 or 3 loss team, and you're right. They're every bit. They're dangerous
Auburn,
all the time.
Missouri, Kentucky. Then you have State again, at Tennessee.
Tennessee's tough.
Florida, and then at Auburn. So the back end of this schedule.
Look, there's not a single game there. There's not a single game we've played. There's not a single game to be played where you're not better if you got Mark Sears.
Agreed.
There's no doubt. That all being said, yes, you can win without him, but you got to have everybody go in the same direction too. You can't have this thing splintered. And again, it's why as I sit here and talk with you today, I'll talk with Nate Oates tonight on his radio show. Probably the first thing I'll go with out of the gate, Coach, let's get it out of the way. Where are things? What can we say? Unless I'm given the directive not to, that's probably how I'm going to start. And I don't make any apologies for that. I'm not a journalist. I'm the Alabama play-by-play guy. I'm the host of the Coach's TV radio show and TV show. So, but I wasn't told, don't talk about it.
Right.
I knew how things were going to be discussed. I knew what the talking points were. And I think it was managed very well. Again, I get why we're talking about it. I get why it's been the topic of shows, formats, next round, every other platform that covers Alabama at any level, and nationally, it's a story. My gut feeling, knowing all the parties involved, this ain't going to be an issue Wednesday night.
Yep. They ended up winning the basketball game, which was good. They did beat LSU 80-73.
It wasn't like Ole Miss, where when you don't play well or as well as you're capable of, you got beat.
Aiden
They
Holloway
won.
led all scorers with 19. Again, just continuing to show where he's kind of finding his role in this team and getting his groove. Then you have Mohamed Diabate with 14, Chris Youngblood with 13, Grant Nelson with 12, and then LeBaron finished out double-digit scores with 11.
Yeah.
Still, the one thing that I know pissed a lot of people off was they got out-rebounded 43-41 overall
Right.
by LSU.
Yeah.
Because rebounds is one of those things you kind of judge your hustle, your fight. How hard are you going to fight to get in there to get that ball?
Right.
And when you don't see that, and then you're sitting there looking at the stats, you're like, well, that would.
And again, that's the thing you can control. It doesn't take talent. It doesn't take talent, or for that matter, obviously size can help in rebounding, but that's not the only factor in rebounding. It is more hustle and work than it is height that determines how successful you are. We saw it with Barkley, and there's a ton of other examples. Mo's a great example of that. Mo's normally the smallest big on the floor.
That's 6'7".
But he's a heck of a rebounder. Chris Youngblood can guard anybody on the floor because he plays so tough. And yes, he's 6'4", but he's strong and hustles and plays aggressive. So, again, it's not all about the height. Who's the tallest? You got to work.
And do you see the correlation with Sears sitting that they were only 7 for 23 for 3-point range?
He would have gotten more shots.
He went 0 for 5 in the first half, which
did.
Interestingly, in the Illinois game, he also went 0 for 5 in the first half.
He did, but what did he finish with? Again, they're only first half numbers. How many assists did he have?
Okay, well he had 3.
3 assists. I think he turned it over a couple of times.
2 turnovers.
But 0
yeah.
for 5 from the field, 0 for 2 from 3.
3-point, yeah.
Again, now he's
And
a lot of that is
and
where
17 minutes of play.
Yeah.
So
look, was I surprised that he didn't start the second half? Of course I was. I'm looking around, and the first concern is, he's hurt.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You think the worst naturally, or I do anyway. You're worried about injury, then you think, okay, well, maybe he's told coach go the hot hand, then realize as we go on that that's not the case. But we're told it was coach's decision. That was the word we got, and we heard post-game. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. I heard that privately, and the same thing that was said publicly. Coach's decision that he didn't play. So,
do you feel like their 3-point shooting has been off, though? Or
they're not doing it at the level they're capable of.
Yeah.
But also, you didn't have Youngblood at all early. And then he's trying to get in routine and rhythm.
Maybe it's just because we watched LSU take 23 3-point shots and they only made 3, because that was awful. I almost felt like anytime they squared up to take a 3, it's like, let them.
Yeah.
Let them.
Go
get under the goal.
That was not.
There were a lot of air balls.
Which can make it tough. Look, here's the thing. You don't hit rim, you tend to miss because you're sitting there watching and you're thinking timing, play it, all the things that can factor there. But sometimes an air ball is the worst thing that can happen.
It's pass.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we mentioned Wednesday you are headed over to Starkville for a night game. Bulldogs coming off an overtime win against South Carolina, so they're 4-3 in conference play, 16-4 overall. So one thing you can guarantee with a Chris Jans team is it's going to be physical,
right?
And they are going to squeak some shoes on defense.
They will, and they've got good size, and they'll be a tough matchup. This will be very similar, I think, to the Ole Miss game.
Yeah,
and they beat Ole Miss. So, this is a dangerous team. You better play well, better shoot it well. Hump's a good gym to shoot in, but you better defend. That'll be the bigger concern in that. And look, it's one where I'll be shocked if Alabama's not favored. it's one you need to get. But this is not one you go ahead and, okay, it's a given.
No, I'm not getting, you don't get the ink out and go ahead and put it on the schedule as a W yet. But you are getting into a period of 4 games here with Mississippi State. Then you've got Georgia coming into town, not looking too far ahead. You've got Georgia this coming Saturday. And then you are at Arkansas, at Texas. Texas came back and they came back by 22 points to beat A&M, I think, in Austin this weekend.
Arkansas and Texas.
Yeah.
There.
But Arkansas.
Especially. Yeah, but you're right. They were down. Texas was down 22 with 17 minutes to go.
And came back and
came back and won it.
Yep. That is the ultimate. Don't look at the scoreboard. Just play. And one basket at a time. One basket at a time.
For A&M, 2 of all people lose 2 like that.
It's a fun,
especially as they've just gotten back in that league.
It's a fun ride home. But I do wonder sometimes if timing is a part of when coaches will either, and I'm not going to say we've been leading up to this, but we know that Coach Oates has not been happy with their defensive effort in several games prior to this past weekend's LSU game. Yeah. So it's like, okay, are you sending the message now before you get into just that murderer's row?
Sure, that happens.
As you finish up.
I remember, I forgot who it was and who told me, but there's a story, and Wimp's told it on air before, I think. You know, he had a rule that he was the last one on the bus, and when he got there, the bus was going to leave. Well, there was a game, and I think it was Robert Horry. They're playing on the road, and Robert Horry was not on the bus. And this was not a bad team they were playing. This was going to be you needed Robert Horry.
Yeah.
And Wimp calls one of his assistants over, or a manager. I think it was a manager. He said, "I'm going back to my room, and you come get me when everybody's on the bus. But you make sure everybody's on the bus before you come get me." And so he was late getting on the bus, but he made sure Robert Horry was there because he wasn't going to that arena.
You want to send I'm sending a message, but Robert Horry's going to be on the bus when I send and deliver that message
Pat
too.
With the Jeff Berger game, I think where Berger did, I don't know what it was, but Berger didn't play the first snap. He didn't get his name introduced, didn't play the first snap, but he was in there on the second snap. That, you know, that happens a lot.
Game, okay? I'm standing on principle on this one, and he didn't start.
Message? Do you understand?
That's right.
Okay, good. Get out there and win.
Okay, so State in Starkville Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on the SEC Network. And then Saturday, the Tide back home, take on Georgia, 3 o'clock, ESPN2. But, of course, you know, if you're like me, you can always hear Chris Stewart calling the game on the Crimson Tide Sports Radio Network, and always can find him at chrisstewart.online. We need to thank Scott Forrester for being always flexible and always talented back there.
Translation.
Thank you.
Translation, we were late again, or I was. Sorry. Thanks, Scott.
I mean, this is how good he is. We can put this together on the fly, and he still makes it look this good.
Scott's, he polishes things as nicely as possible.
I know. All the Alabama content you can shake a stick at is on Cover Crimson, and you can find everything you need to know each and every day with Jim, Ryan, and Lance right here at the Next Round. I'm Kelly Hunter. I'm alongside Chris Stewart. We'll be back again next week with Respect the Process. But before we go,
Roll Tide.
Have a great week. See you next time.